Thank you, everyone. Welcome to our Latinas in Tech and Tequeria webinar, celebrating Latinas in Tech, paving the way towards the future. We appreciate everybody joining us during their lunch hour. We know you're very busy, and we're very excited to have an amazing panel of wonderful women with us today. But before we get to that, I wanted to talk a little bit about the partner organizations, who we are, and why we're bringing this to you before we get to our panelists and moderators. So, Latinas in Tech is a nonprofit organization that serves to connect, support, and empower Latinas in the tech industry. Basically, that's our main goals, and you have some wonderful females there showing their strength. What we do, we are focused on three basic pillars, which are professional development, recruiting, and mentorship. And all our events, everything we offer you, all those resources are geared towards those three pillars. By the numbers, we have 11 chapters in Mexico City, LA, Sacramento, New York, Chicago, Miami, Boston, Atlanta, which represent about more than 8,000 members with 23 different nationalities and who are working in more than 100 tech firms, including Google, Facebook, Twitter, BuzzFeed. We have people from venture capital firms like our panelists today, or from coding boot camps. So we are representing Latinas all over in the tech industry. We definitely want to invite you to become an LIT member. So you can go onto that link to register. It's basically the largest network of Latina women in the tech industry. And if you want to connect in different ways, there's our page. There's some links right there. We have a Slack channel. We have, of course, Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. So you can join us in those ways. And I'm going to hand it over to another great organization that we partner with called Tequeria, so they can talk a little bit more about their org. Carolina?
Hi, everyone. Sorry, technical difficulties all week. I'm Catalina Castro. I'm with Tequeria New York City chapter. Tequeria supports one of the largest networks for Latinx in tech. It's a nonprofit. It started out in San Francisco, and there's about 10 chapters all around the US, slowly growing more and more. Like I said in the beginning, I help run the New York City chapter along with David, who's also here, and two other amazing organizers. Hopefully you'll meet them at other points, Vanessa and Chloe. I'm super excited to be supporting this event and partnering with Latinas in Tech.
Excellent. Thank you, Caro.
Yeah.
And now we get to the amazing part of our panel. We have our wonderful moderator, Carissa Parrish from Bonita Semana, and panelist Ariana Fontijos from Twitter. I hope I said that correctly. Cheryl Campos from Republic, and Michelle Cantos from Full Stack. So I'm going to hand it over to Carissa to go ahead and begin. Thank you so much, ladies, for being with us and sharing your insights in advance.
Thank you. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. Hello, everyone. Welcome, and thanks for joining us today as we celebrate Latinas in Tech and this panel, Paving the Way Towards the Future. Again, brought to you by Latinas in Tech and Tequeria. My name is Carissa Parrish. Again, I serve as the CMO at Bonita Semana, which is a wonderful weekly newsletter, a digital magazine and online community created by and for career-focused Latinx millennials. And so, yes, it brings me great pleasure today to be your moderator as we celebrate Latina leaders in tech, gaining valuable insights from their experiences. And it is my sincere hope that you leave today feeling a bit of levity, inspired, encouraged, and part of a supportive community. So without further ado, I'm just going to reintroduce our esteemed panelists just once more. We have Michelle Cantos joining us, Cheryl Campos, and Ariadna Font-Litos. So I'm going to just dive right in. And before I do, I'd just like to ask that throughout our conversation today, you participate with us in the Q&A portal at the bottom of your screen. And please leave your comments and questions here for the end of the program. And again, the Q&A section and not necessarily the chat section, please. So to begin, panelists, would you kindly share a bit about your journey with us? Did you always envision you would go into the tech field? If not, how were you first exposed to opportunities therein? And what was a critical experience that helped you get into tech?
Great, so I can begin here. Hey everyone, my name is Cheryl Campos. As mentioned before, I work at Republic as head of growth and partnerships. Essentially, Republic is a spin out of AngelList that allows anyone to invest in startups and for startups to raise up to $1 million in capital. I actually, taking it a step back, I graduated from Harvard in 2015 and I went straight into banking because I thought that that was the right path for me. I had a major in economics, so I sold my soul for a wonderful price. But at the same time, I realized quickly that despite like the technicals that I've gained and all that life experience, that's, you know, it's really a boot camp in a year and a half. That wasn't really what I wanted to do day in and day out. I went into private debt and equity right after that, which was for another year, but found out that whether you're at the buy side or sell side of finance, it's still relatively the same in terms of culture and people. And so I did not plan to go into tech myself, even though back in college I was surrounded by a lot of people that were in it. My core friends, which generally more were Latinx and other minorities, they were not in it. And so I thought that tech was for people that knew how to code. And so I was like, I am not that person. I can definitely crank on an Excel spreadsheet, but I can't necessarily do that, or I don't have the experience in it. However, I found out actually through a mentor that Republic was hiring, and it was the perfect intersection between something that's cutting edge, right? Because the laws that allowed for anyone to invest in startups changed in 2016. So, and I joined 2018. So it was cutting edge, but it was also fintech. And so it really was combining what I had previously learned in finance along with, you know, this new field of tech. And so that was kind of my way of segueing into a career in tech. And then we're also social impact, which is something that I'm very passionate about, because you always need to have a why as to, you know, why you're waking up, why are you doing this, and so that was kind of my way of staying in tech, is because I have that social element to it.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. And maybe just going back even further, when you were, let's say, even back in high school, did you have something in mind that you thought maybe you'd study before you even moved into economics and then tech?
I actually was always kind of focused on securing the bag. I was more like my family, like I knew that I was going to be the breadwinner. So my brother is actually, he's going to graduate from med school, super exciting. And he always wanted to be a doctor. So he's a scientist, and I'm supposed to be the lawyer, but I knew very early that I was not going to do that. So I always just kept my mind open, and I think that's what made my college experience also very fruitful, was because I was just open to whatever kind of came to me. But I knew that since I had to be the breadwinner after leaving college, that was going to decide what I was going to pursue.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, congratulations to your parents on a Harvard graduate and a doctor. Yeah, and so then next, I'd love to hear from anyone who'd like to share, what role did your upbringing and culture play in becoming a leader, and perhaps also joining the tech industry? Did you find that it helped or hindered you in any way?
So did you want us to not answer the first question?
Well, you're welcome to. Yeah, go right ahead if you'd like. That'd be wonderful.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So as a way of introduction, it helps. So now I'm at Twitter. at Twitter for over 6 months as a director of engineering for Cortex, which is a machine learning organization, so machine learning platform, as well as the New York site lead. I came through IBM and first a startup, which I actually went there after graduating from my PhD. So I kind of have been in tech for a while, but I also did not start there. And my first experience was while I was studying translation and interpreting. That's my college degree. I was in Barcelona. Then I discovered my passion for computational linguistics, which was one of the subjects we had to do. And while most people were dreading it, I was just looking forward to it all week. It was like I remember we had to write translation grammar rules from English to Spanish and Catalan, and it was just the most fun I had in a long time. So that's kind of determined my path and my fate, because I did take all the electives I could with the same professor, which was Dr. Tony Badia, which was a mentor and a great scientist. So I ended up doing my senior thesis with him. It was in an NLP. So I did start programming then. It was in Prolog, so definitely not one of the modern languages you would think right now. And after that, after my graduation of undergrad, he basically hired me to be a research assistant in his applied language institute. So that's kind of what drove me into applying for a fellowship, getting into a PhD program at Carnegie Mellon here in the US, and the rest is history. And it was not planned. It was very much just following my passion. And yeah, I'm super grateful.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much for that background. It's very helpful. And Michelle, would you like to share a little bit about your journey as well? Do we have Michelle? Okay.
She's joining.
Yes, we'll just move right along then, and hopefully she'll be joining us shortly. Yeah, so just back to the next question. I'd love to hear a bit about how your upbringing, your family, your culture played a role in you becoming a leader and really driving your interest in tech.
Oh, you want to take it, Cheryl?
You can go first and then
Yeah.
Wonderful.
So I do come from an academic family. So most of my family, like both parents, uncles, and even sister, they all have either a PhD or a medical degree. So for me, I did not necessarily know what my PhD was going to be on early in my sort of undergrad years, but I always figured I would likely pursue graduate studies. And I did do that, right? And I think in terms of culture, my mom is a scientist, a professor at the University of Barcelona, and she's always been both a mentor and a role model. So she's very active, strong woman. I definitely had someone to sort of learn from. And she's always been very supportive and encouraging of my dreams, which have been slightly crazy and maybe not super orthodox. And for example, I wanted to go abroad and study my undergrad abroad, and my dad basically said, there's no way, over my dead body, you're not doing that, which kind of led me to pick translation and interpreting, because the curriculum forced me to actually, like, that was part of the studies. I had to go to another European university. So I did that, but I couldn't have done it if my mom wasn't supportive, obviously. So I ended up doing it not just once, but I think 4 times. So I did spend almost as much time abroad as I did spend at home. And my dad wasn't happy, but I think having someone who supports you is critical. And I definitely don't underestimate that, because that formed who I am, and my choices brought me where I am today, for sure.
Oh, thank you. That's wonderful. That actually segues quite nicely into my next question. Well, Cheryl, did you have any role models yourself? And if so, did they happen to be men or women? And were you able to be mentored by your role models at any time?
Yeah, so my mom obviously is a role model to me. She's actually a single mother who raised both her kids up by herself in inner city New York. So like, Latina women are some of the strongest women I know. That being said, yeah, in terms of role models, I would say there were a couple that I had back in banking that were more like allies. So in the sense that every time like I would do work, like, and I'm a lot more like discreet about what I do sometimes. Like if people actually knew all the things that I do, they would be like, that's crazy. But I usually am a lot more reserved and just kind of like, I know that the work will speak for itself. But you know, I definitely had like male champions that would actually highlight that not only did I do the work, but I deserved to be in the meetings where the work was discussed, especially when it came to investor meetings and roadshows. So in that sense, I definitely had like mentors because they constantly were letting me get, they were giving me feedback. They were letting me be part of kind of this growth journey of um, interacting with investors and making sure that I got better and better at my job, which I think was very valuable. And at the same time, I actually have a mentor who is actually now my boss because she's the one who told me about Republic, and she's actually at Republic. So I now work directly with her, and she's more of a guide in the sense of like I am the person that does the work and like executes on all of the ideas and the strategies, and she's more just sometimes takes a step back and, you know, gives me the big picture of what we're doing, which I think really helps, especially when you're, you know, when I'm very focused on the devil in the details and like trying to make sure that everything's correct. I think she has been just invaluable in helping me grow, especially in a startup where you can always do so much. And so I actually met her. So she's also like me. She also went to Harvard. She also did banking. But she's 7 years older than me, but she's also Latina. And like, I met her outside of college and like I was just like, you're like me, but just a few years ahead, please be my mentor in my mind. And so like, but I made sure to always follow up with her. We had coffee like every 6 months to a year. And then when this opportunity came up, she was the one who had me in mind. And so that was something that's invaluable because it's really changed my life. So in that way, I'm blessed to actually be mentored by her right now, and I'm constantly learning.
Oh, that's wonderful. Mentorship is incredibly important, both being a mentor and seeking one out yourself. As leaders, it's important to have and demonstrate a growth mindset. In this way, you can turn challenges into opportunities for personal and professional development. And in thinking about challenges, what challenges have you faced in your career? How did you maybe overcome these challenges? And I know you just mentioned that she has been an ally for you, but have you had allies who've helped you along the way?
Yeah, so in terms of allies, like I mentioned, I definitely had some great champions who were, you know, men who were a little bit older than me and were able to advocate for my work, which I think is also just a woman thing, right? Where sometimes you just don't talk about what you do and you just kind of assume that things, you know, go for themselves, whereas others, you know, make a big scene and then they get credit. I still kind of follow that and I always have to check myself as well because sometimes I do have to promote what I'm doing just so that people understand like there's a lot more to my role, and I could go the extra mile like all the time. But that being said, yeah, there actually are also like mentors that I've had in the past that have like burned me because of like just either miscommunications or because of I don't know, they may feel threatened. This happened at a previous job as well, where it's just kind of like they just did not necessarily like. I thought they were my mentors because I thought they had my best interest in mind, but sometimes you have to just make sure that stays the same. And so for me, I've had both good and bad experiences with mentors. So it's always about constant communication. It's always about making sure that your incentives are also just aligned at the end of the day versus combative. And I think it's more fruitful if you can always end up giving more than receiving at the end of the day. I'm always a giver. I always like make sure to know like, hey, what do you need? What is it that I can help you with? Because I think at the end of the day, you get a lot more out of that and a lot more learning as well. So I've learned both from those experiences, at least with working with mentors, as well as, you know, with their feedback and kind of growing with them.
Great, thank you. And Ari, could you share with us any challenges that you faced and how you may have overcome them in your path to where you are today? Ari, you're on mute.
Thanks.
No problem.
Just talking to myself over here.
Sure.
Yeah, I think as you were saying, growth mindset is critical, and it's something I've always had, even though before I knew that it was a thing. And then I watched Linda's Rising talks about an agile mindset, which definitely I recommend. That's about this, right? Specifically with young girls. I think yeah, in terms of challenges, like for me, I had challenges when my dad was kind of a naysayer and always was not very supportive. And of course I had my counter to support me. Otherwise I probably wouldn't have been so lucky. Even in grad school, I think everybody who's been in grad school, like there's a ton of challenges, almost like a challenge course. So I think what I always say, it might speak a little bit about your intellectual capacity, but it mostly speaks about your stubbornness and your ability to be resilient and to say, I'm going to do this. And despite all the adversities that are going to come your way, you're determined, you stay the course, and you say, other people can do it, I can do it. And I think that I am like that. And I think obviously that got me through grad school, and that has helped me at work. I had bosses that weren't maybe the best boss. And they didn't even know what to do with me because I was such a different, like I wasn't a hacker, and they were used to maybe having people that were engineers and hackers. And I was a different kind of programmer, and programming wasn't necessarily the best use of my time. I could do it, but like if you ask me where are you going to add value to this startup, it might not have been programming. And I tried to have these discussions, but my manager wasn't necessarily experienced enough or had the mindset that could help me. And I actually went through some hardship at work until I got a really great VP of engineering who was more experienced, who completely understood what I could do and gave me the opportunities, and basically never really limited my ability to add value, and didn't put me in a small box. Basically asked me, what role do you want to do? Like, what do you want your job title to be? Because he knew like I was passionate about helping, and I could do help, but like coding might not have been the best way for me to do that, or the most effective. And so just believing in yourself and finding your rocks, that could be your boss, could be a peer, could be someone in this wonderful network that we have with women in Latinas in tech, right? So I think whatever it is for you, but believe in yourself and don't give up.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. You both mentioned working at startups. And so I'd like to just propose a scenario. Consider, if you will, the role of a recent female graduate pursuing a career in tech in a workplace. Let's assume a startup that's heavily dominated by men. This workplace might be inspiring, it might be really open-minded, but there are no women on a leadership team. Based on your experiences, how do you build confidence to drive change?
Yeah, I mean, I currently am at a startup with no women in leadership, and also with it is mostly male dominated. So this is home. However, I would say it's about going back to the fundamentals. Sometimes when you feel uncomfortable or out of the box, or especially when you're growing, it's about going back to center. So say, okay, who am I? Why was I hired for this role? How can I add value? And then where is there a path forward? I think in any scenario, if there is no path forward, then that's time to leave, because I don't think they should ever stunt your growth. But I mean, I've been rising up the ranks steadily over the past year and a half, 2 years. So for me, I still think that there is room to grow, and that's kind of the goal that I keep in mind. It's not just looking at who's around you, but like focusing on yourself. That being said, I also like to think about the mission of the entire organization, so that like taking a big step back, like, okay, why are we all in this together? As a startup, you can only do so much yourself, and kind of looking past everyone, saying, why are we all together in this collective, and how can we move forward to really support our mission to democratize access to investing and fundraising? And so for me, it's always about, making sure that we're a team, but at the same time having, your interests also aligned, which it's just a constant iteration there, right? It's constant, like every day checking in and saying, am I happy here? Is this a place that I know I can thrive? And I mean, men aren't so bad. You have to kind of learn how to work with them, and that just takes time, both in banking and in tech. It's weird. It's like two different types of bros, but it's still like around. It's still something that you have to just navigate and learn from. And just it's related to what Adriana said as well about like being a little bit stubborn, or like kind of working with what you have in order to kind of get results done, especially in a startup where you are like constantly moving fast, and it's just about working with people, and they're just people at the end of the day, so just kind of like rolling with the punches and thriving by doing a good job.
Absolutely, that's great advice. And thinking about, you said you need to check in and ask yourself, am I happy here? What kind of advice could you give to someone who is trying to navigate a potentially toxic work environment? How do they navigate whether to stay or to leave? Whether they're experiencing some forms of racism or sexism or some subtle, microaggressions. What would be your advice on next steps, even if it's because sometimes startups don't have human resources and it can be really challenging?
I would say like that's extreme, but even in a regular environment, there's going to be the microaggressions, right? The bias that I think we even ourselves suffer, actually. Unfortunately, it's a human nature kind of thing where you use biases so you can survive in this world. So I would say people that think they're not biased, they should check themselves, because everybody's biased. And I think even in a great, thriving organization that has some diversity and has some, you're still going to experience this. So I kind of want people to prepare mentally that this is going to be a reality for a while. And whether it's crazy toxic, which of course you have to decide, if this is not a place where you can learn and you can thrive, then maybe you need to make a change, like Cheryl was saying. I think if it's a place where you can still learn and it's not so toxic that's affecting your health, and you're able to compartmentalize and able to block that so that it doesn't affect you, I think if you can learn, then go ahead and try to work it through. Because I have to say, I learned from negative experiences as much or more than positive ones when it comes to leadership, for example. So you're not always going to have a great boss who understands everything and who's an oracle. So you might have a terrible boss even, but you can learn a ton in terms of what are things you don't ever want to be or don't ever want to become. And to me, what I recommend is you use your North sort of star, your compass, internal compass, align with your value system, and you let that tell you, okay, this is unacceptable. I don't want to work in a place where people are treated like this. And then you draw the line there, or you say, well, it's this person just doesn't know any better and I can learn from them. And at the time when that becomes too much, you can basically make that call to leave. But definitely integrity, personal integrity comes first. So if you feel like that's getting compromised, then might be a good time for you to leave, right?
That's wonderful advice. Thank you.
Yeah, can I jump in for a second here? Just because from banking, that was kind of my experience too, and from banking PE, just in terms of having a support system there for you. I really thought that I was going to be a CEO of a bank. Like that was what I wanted to do in the next, 20 years, was really cement myself as a financial leader. However, actually being in the field, you quickly learn that whether or not that's for you. And I knew that it wasn't. However, there are also a lot of people that either are stressed and are taking stress out on you, and you just kind of have to like understand how to best cope with those things that do happen. Or sometimes they like gaslight you. Sometimes they'll just, they'll be mean, and it's just kind of like, am I crazy? Like you will take a step back and be like, is this something, like, am I just imagining this? Thankfully I had a lot of like peers around me that like were like would overhear things, or were like it was crazy, and they'd be like, no, you're right. And so it's constantly having those people that support you, and also thinking big picture, right? Is this a stepping stone to the next place where you want to go? I mean, sometimes to our point previously, yes, it's about making sure that your mental health is not completely compromised, and it's not as toxic as some other places. Then it might be okay to ride out for a little bit longer. But once it becomes, just dangerous to yourself, then I think that's kind of like the time whether you leave. I generally, if you do leave a toxic environment like that, just to make sure that there is another job waiting for you. Once again, I'm the breadwinner in my family, so I can never really like take a gap or some unemployment time. But that being said, it's always good to like always, always be open to new possibilities, and to make sure that you keep them in mind, so when things do head south, that you at least have some backup plan as well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Ari, to your point about really having, using your personal integrity and following your North Star, and really learning even from bad bosses and maybe not ideal working situations, taking what you can from those experiences, what would you say are, or how would you say that you use your authority as a senior leader to positively influence other women's career trajectories in your own organization or in your community?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think that's part of what I like about my current position, is that I can actually help shape cultures for my org for sure, but even influence the culture outside of my org. And I always, of course, being who I am and my beliefs, right? I will, right now we're hiring, and I'm saying, diversity first. I'm explaining the benefits. I'm making sure it's not just a mandate, but it's why is that a good thing? And I have a pretty sort of male dominated team, and in the leadership team especially. And I know I have been in situations where I've been able to bring women on the leadership team level, or have just been with them. And it's just such a big difference. And I think people that haven't experienced, of course, they don't understand how that's going to be different. But so I have seen it, so I can explain that. So being an educator for people, not assuming that because it's better, people will, of course, you have to kind of educate people around it and not assume they're going to immediately know the benefits. And then just keep at it and make sure you reach out, make sure I offer one-on-ones to everyone, but I will make sure that I have one-on-ones with all the women in my organization, for example, and I'll make sure to check in on them often. My peers, for example, if they're having a situation like this actually happened 2 days ago, where they're in a position where they could need someone to kind of give them a little boost or a little help, and sort of reach out to their manager and say, this person is fantastic, you should absolutely consider her for this. Like, you can do that. That takes you 5 minutes of your day, and you've supported someone. And I think you have to sort of understand that the more you support each other, it's like this network that we were talking about, this support network, the better the environment, the better the culture. And you got to start as a technical leader, you have a lot of influence and a lot of, say around how people get treated, what's the value system you want people to have. That's my dog. I hope you don't hear her too much. So sorry about that. But yeah, I don't know if that helps. That's what comes to mind though.
We all have new coworkers these days. That's quite all right with the dog. Yes, that's really wonderful. And, as a senior leader, as a mentor to so many people in your organization, I'm sure that you coach them on, their own career paths and navigating the next steps. How do either of you coach team members or people who are not necessarily in managerial roles yet? How do you coach them to really harness their power to lead and build influence within their own teams?
Yeah, so in my case, we definitely have grown pretty quickly. So I was employee number 25 at Republic. Now we're close to like 90, 100. And that's in the past year and a half, right? So there has been a lot of changes. And that means it's kind of similar to what Ari said as well about constantly checking in. I think for me, I'd rather know about things sooner rather than later. And so it's about being like overly communicative sometimes, whether it's through Slack, whether it's actually hopping on a Zoom, whether it's through weekly check-ins. I am very hands-on. So like sometimes, so actually this is a good example. Like this happened a couple months ago, but I was speaking with one of the folks that I hired prior, and we don't work necessarily in the same team anymore, but I'm still a mentor to them. And so I checked in, and they just kind of looked at me with like a petrified look on their face. And I was like, "Are you okay?" And they were just like, I have so much to do." And I was just kind of like, "Okay, what is it you need to do?" And they started listing things out, and I literally was like, "Okay, I'll take care of these two. Let's go." So I ended up doing it in like 20 minutes because I obviously had a lot of more experience, but like I could just take it off their plate, make their lives a little bit easier. And they actually were like, "Oh my God, that helped me so much. I can actually do the rest of the things I need to do." And I was like, yeah, because I know that look. That's the paralyzed look. That's the look where you're like, you just don't know where to start. You don't know how to do things. You just are like, you feel like you're drowning. And so I just knew that like if we both work together on this and like, just kind of get things done for the benefit of the entire organization, then it kind of works out. I don't do that often. I do it only when I see that look or when I know that they need support. And then they came through for me later as well, when like I had that look on my face when I was just like constantly like I'm bombarded by all these different requests and how to stay centered and prioritize. It's about just being like really great team members and not just, thinking about like as like it's a mentor-mentee relationship, but more about really being peers and working on the trenches to kind of move forward as a team. So they know that. They know I love to get my hands dirty sometimes. We're just out here cranking. And I think that's also what kind of brings more credibility to what I say, is because I've done the work and because I know what I've had this prior experience. And so that does allow for people to take my opinion more seriously in the firm. So that's kind of how I like to approach mentorship, as more like a team thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And when they see their managers demonstrating these types of skills and this sort of outreach, that helps them become a better leader in the future as well. I'm curious, this is a question for you both. What is one tip that you can offer, something you wish you'd known maybe sooner that you think could have potentially fast-tracked you into a senior role?
I can take this.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, by the way? Sorry, you cut out for a little bit.
Oh, sorry about that. So Zoom life. So I'm curious, what's one tip that you could offer, something that you wish maybe you had known sooner that could have potentially fast-tracked your success or your career?
Yeah, I think there might be several depending on the situation, but I would say something that I observe tends to be holding us back as women, I think, and probably as Latinas as well, is that we never feel like, we always feel like we have to prove ourselves. And Cheryl was just actually when she was talking now, it just reminded me of that. Like she feels like she has to prove herself, and men don't feel like that. It's so funny, right? And so I think what I would say is you're never going to feel like you have 120% what you need to do the next exciting thing. So you're going to doubt yourself. You're going to question. But the truth is you are ready. I think because honestly, it should be a learning experience. And as long as the heart is in the right place and you're passionate, you're going to do great and you're going to learn, which is most important, because anybody else in that role would be doing exactly the same thing, trying to learn and figure it out. Except men are going to come in thinking they are 150% ready and they might be 90 or 70% ready. And I think for us, often it's kind of backwards. We're thinking, we're maybe 60% ready and we might be 110% ready, And so I think our own calibrations of our abilities is tricking us. So if I had learned this sooner, I am not sure exactly what exact impact it would have had, but I know that I find myself doubting, like, should I do this? Should I not? Can I even do it? And I think that's just something that it's our little self-talk that's a bit damaging. So if we could get rid of that and build our self-confidence, even if it's just thinking, there's a lot of incompetent men out there trying to do this. Right? And I don't want to insult anyone. I even shouldn't say men. I should say people.
But you can insult
No, I should say people. Like there's plenty of incompetent people, and not that I want to encourage that, but what I want to say is if you feel like you want to try something, go for it. Don't sort of stop yourself. Don't say no to yourself before you even got a chance to anybody evaluating that for you, right?
Yeah. I would say mine would actually be, not everyone is going to be on your side. And I like to think that people are sometimes, good-hearted, that people are, trying to do what's best for you, especially as a newcomer to the field. But a lot of times they're not. And I just had to learn that the hard way, because I would think like, but they wouldn't really do that, would they? And the answer is yes. Yes, they would. And so especially I think coming from, banking, private debt equity, and, even in tech, sometimes people would just, have their interests in mind rather than anyone else's. And that's kind of that's not how I was brought up. I was definitely, brought up to, be a hard worker and to, have, conviction in what you do, but at the same time, always looking, for who's around you and how to best support them. And so for me, like, I had blindly put confidence in some people, which I shouldn't have. And it's a lot more about, okay, how do I take this as a learning lesson? And so, as a lesson, and kind of learn from this. And for me, it's really about not being so naive, and not being as positive about everything when you think that, this will always go your way because people are good-hearted. That's not an assumption that you should make. And it's more about just making sure that you do your due diligence on who's around you and who the best, who your real champions are. Because the champions that, the real ones are the ones that are going to be speaking highly of you when you're not in the room. And those are the ones that you should have close to you, because yeah, that, at the end of the day, like, I didn't realize how much politics can play into this, but politics have really been something that I'm still learning on, quite frankly. I am still learning how to manage that, because I always think hard work pays off, but a lot of times it's more about politics. And so you just constantly have to keep learning, keep growing in that area, and make sure to know who's around you.
Oh, these are both excellent pieces of advice. And I think women in all stages of their careers need to check back in with both of these from time to time. Absolutely. And Michelle was able to join us now. Welcome. I'd love to have you answer the next question. We're so happy you're here. We were just talking about leadership and really laying the foundation for the future, really looking towards the future. But we're going to take a step backwards and look behind us. And would you share maybe a common but avoidable mistake that you think women have made or making in trying to really climb the ladder?
Thank you. And I'm sorry, everyone. We are witnessing the realities of remote working where, I have my team slacking me and 1,000 things happening, but I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for your patience with me. I think echoing what Ariadna and Cheryl are saying, those are absolutely some of the same things I've experienced. I think something that I've been thinking about recently is just not taking things personally, and like really being a lot more self-aware, and making it more about less about other people and more about like what's happening with me. So for example, there are times when a colleague, maybe, either another director, an executive, or a partner or someone undermines me. And it's almost irrelevant whether they meant to do it or not, but what is the end impact, right? The impact is I feel undermined, and now I have to do more work, and I have to, tell my team or a partner that XYZ thing needs to go this way, not the way that someone else stepped in and said mistakenly. And I think part of that has just been like, okay, is this person trying to undermine me? I don't know. And I never will know what's going on in their mind. But for me, this is triggering me, and it's making me feel like someone's trying to put me down, where it might just have been a thoughtless mistake. And how can I just come out of the situation better and learn and grow and fix the situation? So I think it's really hard to remove emotion from really difficult scenarios. When someone undermines you at the workplace, when someone maybe actively puts you down, or, I've had instances where someone I was being considered for a promotion and someone said, oh, I don't think Michelle will be interested in that. Like, I don't know. I don't think she'd be happy. And they're a good friend. So they came and told me, they're like, oh, like, you know, they were going to consider you for this role, but I told them, you know, you really wouldn't be happy. And my colleague was correct. I was absolutely miserable, but it was not their place to speak for me. It was not their place to consider, like, maybe I will be miserable in this role, but that huge salary bump would have been great for my personal life. And I could put up with being miserable. Like, do not, you know, so I've had situations like this where anger, emotion, all of that takes over and clouds how I deal with the situation, when all that needed to happen was a conversation with them. Like, this person had good intentions, but it's almost irrelevant what their intentions were. What actions I take is what matters. So telling this person, hey, it's not your place to speak for me. I see the good intention behind it. You're probably right, but please don't do that again. That's just not helpful for my career, how I manage my career. Like, I have considerations that you don't have, like my finances, taking care of my family, being Latina, and you know, always having a little bit of fear of, like, will I be considered for roles? That's already hard for me. Please don't speak for me. I've had to do this 2 or 3 times with different folks who thought they were helping me or who thought they were advocating for me. Another thing is just the emotion, right? I spent 3 days livid, angry, like wanting to throw a table over. And that wasn't useful. I think, again, I needed to just, like, this isn't a projection. What this person did is a projection of what they thought I needed, not my performance, my ability, my worth. And people are like this. I'm sure I've done this to people as well. And, you know, just removing emotion, finding the best way to help yourself, and just being self-aware that you might be triggered, that others have good or bad intentions, and that it almost doesn't matter. What matters is what you do with it. Yeah, I think that's been a really big one, just being self-aware of, like, what are some insecurities I bring to the table? What are some things that how am I being perceived by teammates? And, like, why am I eliciting the same kind of response or like reactions from people where they're, like, stepping in and trying to advocate for me? You know, I don't want to think about what their motivations are, but just being mindful of all of that. I think that's one piece of advice.
That's excellent advice. Thank you. I think there's a beautiful amount of self-awareness you just shared with us, and it's definitely something people need to cultivate within themselves on a continual basis. I'd like
Carissa, can I say something about this? Because I feel like I often see that, and I had gone through it myself, so it might be useful. When people think of leaders and they want to be a leader, right? I think there's a temptation to try to act and be more leader-like, whatever that means to you, as opposed to be yourself. So I want to say that true leaders are people that are authentic. And so they're not trying to be someone else. They're not trying to pretend something they're not. So as you find yourselves or your leader voice in you, like, just trust yourself, right? And I think that self-awareness that Carol was mentioning, or Michelle was mentioning, sorry. I think that's so important to know who you are, know what you can bring to the table, know that you're unique. So don't doubt that for a second, that you have a unique perspective that will add value, and then really don't try to be who you're not. And I think some people can spend a whole life struggling with that. It's not an easy thing. I certainly had to kind of rediscover, okay, when I had those thoughts, like, okay, so am I leader A, leader B, like what? And it's like, I almost feel like it's good to know frameworks, and it's good to understand, you know, servant leadership versus some other kind of leadership, and what you are most tuned to and what works for you and your teams. But definitely be yourself first and foremost, and you are good enough, and yes, you can do it.
Thank you. Absolutely. That's wonderful. As we move into looking towards the future and wrapping up, I'd like to just invite the audience to submit any tips or resources that they have found to be quite useful in developing their leadership skills, and we can potentially discuss those later or share them with everyone who joined today. You can just leave those in the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen. And then, yeah, so looking towards the future, and maybe Michelle, you could take this one. What type of goal-setting activities do you recommend for women as we seek to make a greater difference in the industry or even in our own organization?
Thanks. I love that question. Anything around goal setting is really fun because I think there's kind of two traps you fall into, right? Like I think a lot of people evangelize, like have a goal set, like have a journal, a bullet journal, and write all your goals for the day and for the week and for the month and the quarter. And I think it's helpful to get your thoughts out there and write them down, but it's also kind of a trap in that it's hard to take action. It's hard to feel motivated when you can't meet those goals. And so I think I can share some of what I do that helps me just stay centered and grounded and kind of keeping the most important things at the forefront without it being demotivating. So something that I like to do is just an end of year review, which is something I've actually written about this. I'm happy to share a link later to it. But in a lot of, I don't know where folks are from, but I'm from Ecuador, and in a lot of other Andean cultures in South America, you do like the end of year celebrations are a really big deal, right? We have a lot of burning rituals and like family events and places where you gather to think about the year before and what you want for the next year and have a lot of well wishes and that kind of thing. So professionally, I've adapted that to mean that end of year, I take a couple of hours, sit down and think about what happened. What were the good, the bad, the things I liked, the things I didn't like. Professionally, I think about salary, my title, the industry I'm in. At a high level, what are the things I would want to accomplish in the next year or the next 5 years? And I map the year out. I also think about, what do I want to learn next year? And let that frame, like what job would I want or what title or what salary can I aspire to? Do I sacrifice learning for salary? And so I do that every end of year and let that kind of frame the next year. I'm sure a lot of you folks who are joining us today are job searching. I feel like I'm always job searching, even though I'm in jobs that I like, but I'm always thinking about that next step and, a little bit anxious about like, when will I be the president of whatever? And it can be quite overwhelming. So I think just keeping it concentrated and high level and actionable is good. So I like to do that end of year review. And then I do like to check in like kind of on a quarterly basis and just see how I'm progressing towards it. Often I've found that, it's a useful tool for manifesting things that you want and just being brave and saying it. It's really scary to say, I want a 6-figure salary before I'm 30. But turns out you might be able to do that much sooner if you just start getting in that frame of mind and thinking about it and asking others about how to make that happen. So I think those are two things I like to do: the annual planning at the beginning of the year, which includes reflection and planning, and then a check-in every couple of months just to see how, if I'm staying true to the desire I had for that year.
Oh, that's great. I think, following your heart is wonderful, but you really need to set intentions. I love that. And I think everyone would be really interested in reading the piece that you mentioned. And finally, we have 2 last questions, and I'm going to make them pointed. So Cheryl, I'd like to ask you a final question for you. How can Latina women support each other in working towards leadership roles? This is a general question, but love to hear your take.
Yeah, so this actually ties in a little bit with what Michelle just said, actually, in terms of supporting each other. I think it's gathering. I think it's being there when things get tough. It's about being transparent and sharing experiences, because we actually have all dealt with these types of issues in different capacities. And actually, I'll tell you 2 quick things. One is, in terms of what Michelle said about manifesting and all of that, I've never been a person who does the whole year in review. I'm just more about like I made it through, bless, like how do I best go forward and from there. And that being said, this year was the first year where I actually did a vision board, and I did it with the Latinos Who Brunch. And so I don't know if anybody knows that group, but essentially it was started by Eliana Murillo from Google to really bring communities of Latinos together in these different cities. And I was able to do a vision board. They provided all the magazines and everything, so I got to like not only reflect on like the past, because they had like worksheets as well. It was like super organized and cute, and I loved it. That's kind of how I like to do things. But at the same time, I was able to have a vision board that I now can reflect on. And then the second thing was actually yesterday. There's the Latinos Who Brunch like virtual that we did, and we all shared about how we're dealing with Corona and this new kind of, I guess, ushered in a new era of work life and equality of life, right? So, and how do we deal with sometimes the privilege that comes with being in tech, right? Because we can work remote versus some others that can't. And so we were all discussing similar to what, you know, you would do in college, where like you just sit in like in the living room and just, you know, shoot the breeze about all these different existential things that you're going through. And so that's kind of like things that have really kept me sane, not only in this time, but in times in general, where we're open, we're transparent, and we're all dealing with the same thing. So let's come together and make sure that we're there for one another. Even like just virtually via Twitter, like I have met so many great Latinos via Twitter, and they have connected me with other great Latinos. And yes, it is a small community, and so you get to know everyone pretty quickly, but there's always more coming in, and we all definitely want more Latinas in tech. So that's why we're doing this, and yeah, that's why we should continue to stick together.
Absolutely, thank you. And final question for Ari. It's often said that you can't be what you can't see. How can we as a community ensure younger generations get more visibility into career opportunities in tech?
Yeah, this is something I'm super passionate about, and I started when I was at CMU at Carnegie Mellon. We were doing road shows, just all women students. We would go to schools and we would literally just have a picture of us when we were little and tell them a little bit of what we loved doing outside of work and what our work was at a high level. And so that was exactly that idea, where we didn't even say women can do this. We just showed women can do this. Because I think to kids, words sometimes are volatile, but like what they absorb from a lot of different ways. Or I have 2 daughters, right? So I'm kind of living that with them as well. And it's more about being a role model. And honestly, all of you don't have to be a leader to be a role model. Like all of you can be a role model for younger women or for kids. And I think we just have to be aware that the signals we're sending. So if we have just being, showing self-esteem, showing confidence is going to help other women build their own self-esteem and confidence, right? And being there for each other, coaching, providing feedback and saying, I know you meant to say this way, but this is how it probably got perceived. And we can check each other and help, because it's, nobody else is probably going to do it. So I would say finding your buddies you can rely on, and then really just seeing everyone around you as potentially someone that you could be helping just by acting and doing the right things. Because I think that's very much the case. Older, younger, doesn't really matter. Like people pick up on things. And I think it's all of our responsibilities to be doing that all the time. That's how I live my life, since I have 2 kids at home, and I know everything I do, they're going to pick up. And if I make a misstep, they are very, very quick to tell me and say, Mommy, you said this, but you did that. I'm like, yeah, I did do that. So I think it's just good, to just realize that. And I'm learning from them as much as they're learning from me too. So not having that presumption that you're teaching, but honestly, you're going to be learning and teaching at the same time, almost all the time. That's how I see it.
Absolutely. Well, thank you to everyone. It's been a pleasure talking with you all and listening to your wonderful feedback. At this time, I'd like to hand it over to Tekaria, Carolina, or David, who will be addressing some of the questions we have gotten from our audience today. And thank you so much.
Hi, ladies. That was such a fantastic discussion. Thank you so much. And just to reiterate, you could just thumbs up any of the questions you want to be answered. I want to kick off with a question from Gabriela Reyes. She asked, how do you embrace being Latinx at work? And have you shifted any perceptions or paved the way for other Latinx talent? Did the question come through?
Yes, it did. I was waiting for others to answer.
Yeah.
Carol, do you want to answer?
Okay.
I mean, I feel like I've been talking a lot, so that's why I'm kind of like, I don't know. Well, for me, to be honest, we have 90 people, I'd say, and we have 2 Latinx folks, and they're both like, it's literally my mentor and I. So my mentor was the one who brought another Latinx person in, which I mean, people like to see as like your obligation of like, oh, like you're Latina, you have to bring other like, you know, POC in, which I mean, in a sense, like if they're, you know, qualified for a job and everything, like yes, do it for the merits of who they are versus, you know, what their token, you know, as a token person. But at the same time, I'm constantly, you know, proud of being Latina. Michelle, you're Ecuadorian, I'm Peruvian, so hey neighbors. And so I literally have my Peruvian emoji on my Twitter. I literally like I'm constantly just proud and speaking Spanish in the office sometimes, especially when people I'm mad at them and I just don't want to know. But even like with some of the newsletters that I put out, I highlight Latinx artists. I am just not. I'm free to be who I am, which I think is an important thing, is like not just to be like, hey, I'm Latina, come see me, but it's more like, hey, this is Cheryl and I have all these things that make me a well-rounded person, and part of that is being Latinx and part of that is like being proud of who I am. Hispanic Heritage Month happened like at our company without a blip when I first joined, which I was like, so nobody's gonna like recognize us here. So then actually this year when it came through, I was like, hey y'all gonna learn today. And like this is the start of it. I'm every week I'm highlighting this song, like y'all gonna know the history of it. So it was something that, you know, I was a little bit more gung-ho about, and about just also creating some events around that and like making sure people know where the affinity groups within our company building is. And so it's just like it sucks that it falls on you to be the champion of all this, but it's also about being authentically yourself to make sure that, you know, you feel comfortable with whatever it is that you want to do. So that's kind of how I deal with it.
I want to say at Twitter, we're very lucky. We have a Latinx Alas BRG. And so that's actually how I got to know women in tech actually this time. And there is a really great group that very active, and that we meet for lunch to speak Spanish. We organize for Spanish Heritage Month. We organize different recipes that we give to the chef that they will cook that Spanish, and they make all kinds of really delicious snacks as well that are like honoring, you know, the Spanish cuisine and the Latin cuisine. And we have the mural that is, of course, also. So I think there's many ways we celebrate the culture at Twitter, and BRGs are a wonderful way to get involved. And we look for allies. You don't have to be Latin to be part of that. And we have a lot of other ones that include Asians, it include women, veterans. So it's something that if you're part of a bigger organization, most likely you'll have that. But if you don't, like Cheryl is saying, don't be shy and just start it, right? Because others will appreciate it.
Mm-hmm. If I may add something quickly, I think it also depends on your field, like what you do at your job, right? It's different to if you're an accountant and if you're the marketing person, right? There might be more leeway if you're a marketer or a recruiter to really embrace your heritage and make use of it. Where if you're in the accounting or a department that's much smaller or not typically known for that, you might choose a different avenue. So I think for me, at Full Stack, you know, we're a coding bootcamp. We teach. It's very service-oriented, human-oriented. There's a lot of opportunity to bring my heritage to the forefront, to really, you know, almost capitalize on it and say like, hey, like I know someone at, you know, I know I can reach out to someone at Twitter because of the Latinas in Tech Network, so I'll bridge that gap. And it's a huge asset for me in my role. But I think the way I've watched other folks is, you know, there's folks who are, you know, and I'm using accounting as an example, but accounting, HR, or other functions where you just typically wouldn't see them so outrightly be, you know, extremely proud and just bring it up all the time. But the way that they're able to leverage their heritage and make an impact is really just observing how many other Latinos there might be in the workplace and just paying a little bit of special attention, right? I'm at a pretty small company. We're 150, so it's quite different. An ERG for 5 of us or 10 of us, there might be 8 of us actually, you know, is kind of different. It really is just purely social. We haven't really felt the need to build something really structured and build out more programming because there really are a few of us and we're pretty close. So What I've seen though happen is like taking a special interest in mentoring, supporting that person, having conversations around performance, the annual performance time, and just saying, okay, this person might need a little extra help, or, you know, we know that we might face some extra biases. So let's make sure we're all working together on our annual performance reviews to make sure that we're in a really good place and just bulletproofing our resumes. I happen to work with a pretty phenomenal team where we're all quite open about our backgrounds, and people are really encouraging and helpful. But, you know, I have that little fear in the back of my mind always that maybe they'll overlook me for something, or, you know, having a colleague just say like, oh, Michelle's not interested. Like, she has her sights on something else. Like, no, shut up. So yeah, I think there are different ways that you can bring it up. It is dependent on your field and your company size. And I think it's a huge advantage in certain careers. It's a huge advantage. It's something that you, it's a strength. It's something, it's like going to college, right? You've been doing this your whole life. It's not just your culture. It's something learned that has a dollar value in the workplace. And so if you're in that bucket, I think you definitely have to be thoughtful. Maybe if you don't speak Spanish really well yet, this might be a good thing to like think about your professional development going that way. If you're really passionate about your culture and you're wanting to connect more with Latin America and bring business that way, that's something that you can do. But if you're just passionate about it in terms of like bringing more Latinos, then you might also just connect with HR and learn more about why they're struggling to attract us, and how you could help. For example, being a part of Latinas in Tech and having this pool of people who could be interested and who you could bring to your company. Thanks.
Great. Yeah, so someone says, I'm not a Latina in tech, but do you have mentorship programs outside of your jobs? So I know that Latinas in Tech does have a mentorship program, so maybe Tatiana could comment on that, and anyone else, if you have other mentorship programs that you're a part of.
Thank you. I'll just talk very briefly. So Latinas in Tech does have a mentorship program that we just launched this year. It was very small. We had, you know, a few mentor-mentee pairs, so it was very intimate. And we had a kickoff event and provided the mentors and mentees tools so that they can continue to build those relationships on their own. We are hoping to continue to do that in the near future and continue to facilitate more programs. So you can definitely please join, stay in touch with us, and email us so you can stay connected, and we'll let you know when that occurs in the future. And I'll let the panelists talk a little bit more about their own mentorship programs.
Yeah, for me, I'm in VC, so there's a Women in VC group, and they do have some mentorship pairings. However, I think everything that I have otherwise is more about, it's just more organic. What I do essentially is I kind of, and this actually ties in with one of the questions that someone also has in the Q&A, but I like to do something for myself every year. And because once again, if I'm the breadwinner, then there's only a small portion that ends up being like for personal things. I'm not a shopper, thank God. So like a lot of money gets saved that way, but like I'm more about like, okay, how can I invest this in myself and my growth? So I had invested for 2 years actually in Parity Partners. That was more like finance and tech focused, and that's how I met some of the great people that I now work with now too. And then I joined Soho House, which is kind of awkward, a whole other story though. Like we could take it offline, but but that's for many different reasons. But even through there, I've met some really great people and mentors. And then there's like several other like clubs that I'm a part of that I mean, it's like a quick like membership subscription thing, but like just this is helpful to like have some different channels where people can find you, because at the end of the day, like you never know like who can be your next best friend, who can be like your next mentor. I mean, so everyone, please follow everyone else on Twitter too, because like love to stay connected. But yeah, that's kind of how I think about mentorship as more informal. Like I don't think I've ever told someone like, you are my mentor. But it's more about, you know, just making sure to stay in touch and to always be, you know, helpful. So.
Yeah, and I would add to that that I'm with you, Cheryl. I'm much more for my job. I do that as a part of my job, and I do as much of it as I can. I see myself as a coach more than a manager, right? So I definitely do that with my directs. I do that with anyone who has a one-on-one really with me. I think at the same time, and I do that at home kind of every day, every hour. So sometimes I want to do more, and I'm like, have to remind myself that I'm doing plenty, so that maybe there'll be another time when I'm not having two young girls that I can maybe give back to the community. But I say in general, the way I look at mentorship is I can learn literally from every interaction and from everyone. And so rather than having maybe two formal mentors, which at some point in my career I have had, now, for example, I don't necessarily have a formal mentor, but the way I look at how I can learn and how I can continue to be mentored more informally is just learn from both good and bad examples. You could even learn from what's going on right now, hearing Andrew Cuomo, for example, versus Donald Trump. Like, what are these two leaders? How do they show up? How are they trying to get the work done? Like, so you can literally learn from everything and everyone around you. And you don't have to call someone a mentor, per your point, Cheryl, to learn and to be mentored. So they can be mentoring you without them ever knowing. As long as you're getting the learnings from them, and as long as you're observing and growing, I think that's something important for us to also realize, right?
I can add a quick thing. I do think if you struggle to find people, or it's just, you know, you're a bit more shy, or don't have a big network yet, I think Cheryl and Ariana both mentioned it, but Twitter can also be a really good resource. You know, find people that you really admire, find some of these folks who like to have really long Twitter threads on specific subjects. Any publications that you read, look for the editors. They tend to have really strong opinions on specific things. Follow, you know, Harvard Business Review, follow folks on this panel, and you can get a lot of content and ask questions directly. You'll see that they'll often follow you back, answer you directly, and that you can get pretty informal, free advice. I think the other thing I'd recommend is don't focus so much on mentorship. There's different things you will need in a long-term career. I think a mentor, a coach, you know, a therapist, like all of these things kind of serve different functions at different times. Also a sponsor. If you're on the job search, you may not need so much a mentor, but someone to give you an in to a company. So that might look like a sponsor. When you're on a job and you're, you know, have questions that you're struggling with and you want to seek advice, a coach might be better, right? Someone who will just listen, help you work through a problem, but not so much advise you, but just a sounding board. So try, you know, don't focus too much on like, I need a mentor right now. I think both Ariana and Cheryl have stressed that it's not to put pressure on yourself about, you need this formal mentor who's an executive at a Fortune 500 company. Like that's a lot of pressure. Just think about what you're actually needing right now and how you can get that through different vehicles.
Great. So another great question. So as Latinas, it seems like we might be juggling our career ambitions and supporting our family more than our peers. If this sounds like you, how do you manage your career development, personal development, and also supporting your family?
Okay. So I guess I can start here. It's hard. It really is. Sometimes you have to compromise, right? Like you can't, you know, you have to always put your family first, unless they're toxic, in which case, different discussion. But thankfully, I have a very tight-knit family, and, you know, I want to do what's best for them. And so that was the consideration of why I joined finance and then how I joined tech. I took a pay cut to join tech, so, you know, because that finance money it's really golden handcuffs, but I got out of that and went into tech. But it was still at a rate where I was able to support my family, and I actually was vocal about it, which I hadn't prior. Like I always wanted to hide the fact that I was a breadwinner, but I think going into tech, I was like, hey guys, like I'm taking this pay cut because I believe in the mission and I really want to be a part of this. but I also have a family support. So this is why I'm asking for, like, as part of the negotiations, I was like, this is why I'm asking for this much. It's not just for me, it's for actually my family. And they were actually pretty supportive. So we ended up in a good compromise, number. And since then, I have always been transparent as to what I'm doing, as to how I'm, performing at work. I know that I can't slack off. I know some people can at work, and like that kind of frustrates me, to be honest, but I can't. I have to always be on because I'm constantly like, this is what keeps my family going. And so it does put pressure on the day to day, but at the same time being open and transparent with some of the people that you work with and saying like, hey, like, and just also the people who would decide what your pay is. I'm always like checking in with them once a month and saying, hey, this is what we did, this is what we're doing, Q2 strategy, which by the way went up in flames from this corona. So I had to like strategize and kind of pivot really quickly. But it's just by being on your game, by being open about, what your salary should be. And then at the end of the day, like keeping your mental health, because that can be a lot to carry on your shoulders. But just, as I mentioned, taking some money to like spend on yourself and like realize that, like you can do all the things that you do want to do at the same time as supporting your family. And if you can't, then it's just making a way so that you can in the future. I've been 4 or 5 years now out of college, which is crazy to even think about. But yeah, your time will come, and it's about just thinking about the long day game so that we're all better off in the future.
Yeah, I actually wanted to say that this is like more of a marathon and not like a quick race. So I think realizing when it's time for you to do one thing versus another, emphasize one. Like if you're having little kids, right? And if you're going through that maternity time, I think definitely don't put extra pressure on yourself. That's your time for taking care of that. And the rest, don't be afraid you're going to lose everything, because you won't. It's a natural time. And putting additional pressure and trying to conquer the world when you're delivering, it might not be very realistic. Some women can do it. So definitely don't let me stop you if you're one of those. But I would say don't have those expectations on you that are going to hurt you more than help you. And really enjoy to me, the family gives me balance and enforces me out of a 24/7, what could become a 24/7 job. There's always more to do than I can in any single day. So having my kids is really a blessing for me more than like a load. Of course, I give me more work, sure. But I'm hardworking, like Cheryl was saying, I'm hardworking, so I'm not afraid of more work. And I definitely balance in my life, and they're forced me into that because they're like, mommy, do this, mommy, do that. Why are you working so much? They're literally closing my laptop. I was like, okay, I was in the middle of an email. But they need me, and they need me to be present. And that's a gift, because if I didn't have that, God knows I'd be like typing until like 3 a.m. and I actually do that sometimes. And it's just bad, and it's not good for my health, right? So I think family can be a blessing, and hopefully it's a blessing for you. And of course you have to balance, and of course you have to manage it. For me, it helped me prioritize things much more sort of aggressively and say, I'm not going to get everything done. What's the essential? So you focus on the essential every day, and the rest, either it won't get done, someone else will do it. But you're not a superwoman. I think, some of you might be superwomen. I know I'm not. I know I just have health that if I compromise on sleep too much and just worry about work, I'm going to get sick. So I can't do that. I got to make my kids happy so that I'm happy, so that the house works. And especially now with everybody at home, is so important, right? To think of it as a marathon and not like every single day. You don't have to do everything every single day. Like just give yourself some slack and be kind to yourself is kind of my biggest words of advice. Like, and be kind to where you are in life. Like you might be in a place where you can give it your all 24/7, go do that if that's what you want to do. But you might be in a place where you need to withdraw a little bit. And that doesn't mean you give up working. That just means you're more in like maintenance mode. You're not going to go for a crazy moonshots, or maybe you are. Just keep an open mind and just really don't. I think just what I would say is don't put extra pressure. There's a lot already when you have a family and a full-time job, and you want to dedicate time to your careers. So let things flow, and I think they will actually.
Thank you, Adriana. I think that was extremely relevant given the times that we're in and just going with the flow and adjusting. So I just want to be very thoughtful and conscious of time and super appreciative for the people that are still on right now. I think that's all we have for questions, but like Cheryl said, follow us all on Twitter, connect with us on social media, continue the conversation. Latinas in Tech has a super active Facebook group where you could ask more of these questions too. So this Tequeria, join us on Slack. And I just want to give Rocio a shout out too. She joined us. She's one of the founders of Latinas in Tech. So thank you so much for being here and for creating this really amazing community. And Tati, I'll hand it back to you in case you wanted to share any other closing thoughts.
Yes, thank you. Well, first of all, we're a little bit off on time, but you know it's a great conversation when it keeps going, right? Yeah, just wanted to really sincerely thank everyone that joined us today in terms of our attendees and our panelists. I'm giving you a virtual clap. I know we're all virtually clapping. Thank you to Carissa for moderating, Michelle, Cheryl, and Ariadna for sharing your amazing experience with us. And we've gotten some great feedback on the chat, and we had a lot of other questions. We wish we could have continued, but we'll take it offline, and please connect with us, stay engaged with us. Thank you so much, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Take care, everyone. Thank you so much.
Stay safe, healthy.
Yes.
Talk soon.
Bye-bye.